Okay, so in the last video, I showed you how to kind of use test-driven development to build out these files. We got a file mover, we got a thumbnail mover, and these are basically going to be subcomponents of our API to help us move files from one directory to another. The next step is we kind of need to build out an API, right? So I need to bring in Express, and I want to try to do this using a test-driven approach. So hopefully I can do this. I just want to say I'm not a professional at test-driven development. I'm doing this mainly to try to learn more. So if you have suggestions of how I can do it better, leave me a comment below. So before I actually install Express, you can actually do test-driven development using integration tests, right? So I could start writing a test that verifies that I have an endpoint that does something, right? When I hit the endpoint, it actually moves a file from one folder to the next. So what we could do is we could try to write that integration test first and then install Express and start building out our REST API. So I'm just going to make a new folder called, like, I don't know, integration. And there's different ways you can kind of structure your project. I'm just kind of doing it how I like it, and then I refactor it later. So I'm going to make a new file inside of that. And this file is going to be called rate a thumbnail.test.ts. Okay, so this is going to be an integration test, right? And there's a lot of ways that you can do integration tests. Like, a lot of people like to bring in something called super test. Or you could just simply use Axios and hit like your local running API. I don't know which way is best. I think I'm just going to use Axios and see how that works. So what we could do is write a describe block. And remember, the inside this string is like kind of like the component or module or API endpoint that you're hitting. Let's just, for right now, I can put like post at slash. So I'm actually going to put like the URL in the method that we're going to do on that URL. And I'm going to say thumbnails, thumbnails slash ID slash votes. Okay, so someone can do a post request to this endpoint, and that is supposed to rate a thumbnail from good or bad. Now inside of this, let's do an it statement, and I should say should move a thumbnail from the backlog directory to the good directory. Actually, I could say when upvoting or when approving a thumbnail, it should move a thumbnail from the good directory to, or from the backlog directory to the good directory. Okay, so a couple things we got to do here, right? First thing is we need to actually try to hit an endpoint. So I'm going to say, let's just use Axios to keep this simple. I don't know, a super test might be easier, but I'm going to install Axios here. Hopefully this works out pretty well for a live coding session. But I can import Axios, so import Axios from Axios. And I think I might need to install the types for this library, but we'll see what happens. So we can basically say Axios, doing a wait on it. Let me make sure I add async here. Ooh. Async. And I don't remember if it's like .post. Yep, it's .post. I can put this URL here. And I think there's a way to put, maybe I need to put like a localhost here. I might have to go look at the docs. URL, let's just try this. HTTP localhost. We'll do 8080. Let's pretend our Express app is running on 8080. We're going to hit thumbnails ID of votes. Okay. And that needs to take a payload. Well, typically that takes a payload, but I don't think our endpoint is going to do anything with that payload. I guess it could. We could send like is good is true or something. So if someone hits this endpoint with an is good, we should expect something. So I'm going to say expect, and we don't know what we need to expect yet, but we should probably be looking at these directories and make sure that stuff has been moved around. So again, this is an integration test. So we can actually test and verify that the file system has done something. You could always mock out the file system if you wanted to in your integration tests, because we are still integrating a subset, right? We're integrating the front part connection of our Express app. If you wanted to mock out the backend, you can do that. It could just be a little bit more tedious to get set up if you wanted to do like an in-memory file system. But let's just do this. I'm going to say expect that if we import fs, so we're going to use Node's file system, and we can basically say look for the good file, fs.read file sync, You know, I think there's another method you can use. I think it's called like test. I don't know. Let's see. Node fs check if file exists. I think it's called stats maybe. I don't remember what this is. But you know what? There's no harm in... Ooh, okay, here we go. Exists sync. So hopefully this works. So basically we need to check if the good file exists. So does good file exist? Okay. And what we could do is basically put a path to that /images/good/testing.png. And if this exists, to be defined, then we should be good. Or to be truthy, I think is what we want. All right, moment of truth. Let's try running this and see what happens. Probably won't work. Nothing ever works the first time in coding. All right, so it's trying to hit the backend on port 8080 and it's failing. And obviously it's failing because we don't have an Express app even created yet. So again, using test-driven development, I'm running an integration test. I'm verifying that if I hit an endpoint, it returns, or it does some type of functionality behind the scenes. Technically, you could like check a database here if you wanted to make sure that the file exists or whatnot. But I'm just checking that there is a file inside testing.png. And I think there's a little bit of extra setup I might need to do. We probably want to put that file, because remember how this works? It's going to basically take a file from the backlog and put it into a good folder. We need to do like a before, I think it's before all. So before all, and then we need to set up that file. So I'm going to say, let's just take that fs method and I'm going to say write file sync, and I need to put that in the backlog. And the content of that would be like hello world. And let's see if this works. Let's run it again and see if it at least makes the file. Okay, there is a testing file there. But we should also verify that it deletes this file, right? So we're going to have to actually check that it doesn't exist in the backlog anymore. So backlog of testing was file removed from backlog. I like to be very verbose with my variables, as you can tell. All right, so was file removed from backlog. This should be falsy, should be gone. And does good file exist? Should be truthy. So I hope that makes sense. I think that is a good test. I don't know if we should do some cleanup in this test. Like, since this file's sticking around, I might need to clean it up. But yeah, let's just go forward with this. We have a test, and I think we're in a good position. So let's install Express. So I'm going to install Express here. And at this point, what we can do is we could basically get set up with Express. So inside the index.ts, I'm going to go ahead and remove all of this logic. Actually, we can probably keep some of it, let's be honest. And instead, we could just import Express and start building out an Express app. So I think you can do this. I think it's express.start or listen, port 8080, express.post. Oh wait, no, it's app. It's like const app equals new. Just call Express. I might have to go to the docs to remember how to do this. It's been a while since I've built out an Express app from scratch. So you import Express, and I'm going to basically create an app, and then I'm going to say app.post, and we need to listen to that thumbnails ID, and that could be votes. And that needs to call a method like so. And we could basically, I think we can kind of keep this stuff around and kind of call it here. So let's just call this. And this is a promise, so I'm going to await on it. And I'm going to say res.json. Maybe I'll just send back a success message. How about that? So again, if you wanted to do like smaller incremental test-driven development, you could just write this endpoint and send back success. And then here you can verify that it didn't crash or you got back a result. So I'm going to say Like you can do this stuff. I don't like doing this. I find it kind of pointless in my opinion. But I could say like expect the data that came back to equal hello or whatever I called it. I don't remember what success. Success. All right, so you can do this and try verifying that your test case actually works. All right, this is failing because I didn't actually start my server. So let me go ahead and open up a new terminal and just start my server. So I'm going to go ahead and I like adding a start script to my package.json, and I can say npx tsnode index.ts. So npm start. Hopefully that works. What is this? Can I find, source slash, my bad, source slash index.ts. All right, so did it run? All right, I'm getting more TypeScript errors because I probably need to, first of all, install the types for Express. So npm install save dev at types/express. And then we probably need to actually have these be typed so that it doesn't complain to us. And I don't know what those need to be. I think it's like maybe response, and I think that should work. Let's try that. All right, so well, since we're running an actual like integration test, you need the service to be running. So I have the service running over here, and I'm going to go ahead and just try to run this test. Again, it should hopefully pass because the endpoint is returning success. And if I were to break this and add like an exclamation mark, we should see that it fails. And it didn't. So what's going on here? Let's go back to our test. We probably are doing something incorrectly. So we're doing a post to thumbnails ID votes. Oh, my bad. So when you save your Express file, you need to restart your server. I should probably get NodeMan going, but I'll do that in a second. Let's rerun that test. And it's failing because it's saying that we got back success with an exclamation mark. So our test works. We have a small little incremental failing test. We know that we can hit the API at this endpoint. Now what we need to do is just start implementing some logic and go ahead and remove that little fake thing. I don't think we care about result here. Well, I guess we could care about the status code. I think we could probably say like expect result dot, what is it? Status to equal 200. You know, let me go ahead and install NodeMon. I think there's a way to do NodeMon with TypeScript. I haven't done this. I think you can just use it. So I'm going to say npm install save dev NodeMon, and then opening up our package.json, we could simply just say NodeMon, and then the file, I believe. Oops. I always do that. When stuff's installing, I update the package.json, and then like it blows away my changes. So let's try this. Let's try npm start. This should start NodeMon over a file, and they already have TypeScript support built in. So we are in a better position now. And to verify that, if I save this file, we should see our API restart. All right, so I hope you are staying with me. We wrote a test, we ran it, it failed. We brought in Express, built out a simple backend endpoint with simple logic. We kind of changed the test to be simpler, just to kind of show you can do incremental improvements. And then we ran it and the test passed, but I need to actually implement real functionality now. So if I uncomment this, we need to kind of modify how this works a little bit. So the ID needs to come from the request, right? So I could say const ID is equal to rec.params, and I could do some type of like object destructuring here. Oops, and I'm sure why that's not working. Let's go like this. So this could be ID. And for is good, that needs to come over in the payload. So I can say const is good is equal to rec.body. Okay, so that should have an is good here. And I think we could just simply do this. If I want to get more fancy, I could just do this to make it a little bit cleaner. So this should hopefully do the logic. And then I'm going to say res.send. I'm going to give that success message back still. And I think by default, this should have a status of 200. So let's just go ahead and run this test again and actually make sure that we don't have a testing file laying around here. Let's just get rid of that. Go ahead and run it and see what happens. All right, so we definitely have some type of failure. It looks like it's timing out. So we made a file, we hit the endpoint, and did the API crash? It did. So the API crash said could not destructure property is good at rect.body as it is undefined. So I don't know why it would be undefined. I'm probably using this incorrectly. So let's go back and say axios.postdocs. And let's see how we do a post. Should just be the endpoint followed by the payload. So let's go back. Why is rec.body undefined? Because that doesn't really make sense. We are passing it in. And I think the issue is that we're not using body parser. Okay, so I probably forgot to set up body parser. So there's a middleware that you can use in Express. I can say app.use express.body parser, I believe. I have to look this up. I don't remember what it is. Express body parser. I know there's a middleware, but they deprecated this for something else. Yeah, maybe this blog post will tell us something. Oh, it's express.json. That's what it is. All right, so this middleware allows our API endpoint to basically take JSON content type requests, process them so that we can actually like use them. So let's try it again. Our test is actually helping us out as we are trying to implement. If you imagine if you're a beginner trying to do some of this stuff, you would just be sitting here wondering like, why is this not working? All right, so the test timed out again. No such file or directory. So we are making progress. Stuff is moving along. But now we're running into an issue saying that there is no backlog of ID. And I'm not sure why ID is coming over like that. rec.params. I'm going to print out what rec.params is here. And go ahead and rerun this. I'm sending over ID. Is my test broken? Like, what am I doing here? Oh, of course. My test is not working properly. I'm sending over the bad code. So again, maybe this is why you should do smaller increments when you're doing test-driven development, because this should actually be the ID of the file. I should say testing.png. So before I go any further, let's just say like image ID is equal to that. And then I'm going to refactor all this to dynamically interpolate image ID. All right, so that should be a cleaner test. Let's just do some refactoring right here. And sometimes I hate when it auto completes my brackets because it's like in that case, I don't want the double bracket there. I'm just trying to do some refactoring. All right, let's try it again, ladies and gentlemen. Let's save this and let's rerun this. Let's see what happens. All right, so the test passed. It moved the file from bad directory to the good directory. So we know that the integration test works. It's actually doing what it needs to do. And again, this logic is kind of covered at a lower unit test level. So it's kind of up to you if you wanted to also test the other scenario where it goes from backlog to bad. I don't know if I'll just do it just because it's probably better to have more coverage than not. But as your project gets really, really large, you want to make sure you don't have duplicate logic being covered. So this integration test is just verifying that the API can accept the post request. It does do some type of logic, but I'm just going to go ahead and say when disapproving a thumbnail, it should move the thumbnail from the backlog directory to the bad directory. So a very similar test. Instead of good, we're going to say false. So the user does not like that thumbnail, and we need to move it from backlog to bad. But one thing you'll notice here is that this image testing.png is actually sticking around. So we probably need an after all to clean up these files. So I think we can say if fs file exists, or what is it called? Exists sync images / bad / testing.png. I could just simply say fs unlink sync, and do that. Now, I don't know if I can just run unlink without having to do this check beforehand, but I'm going to do this to hopefully all the images. Now, there's probably a better way to do this. If you can think of a better way, let me know. But I'm just going to go ahead and clean it up from good, from bad, and I also don't want it to exist in the backlog, because what if the test wasn't doing what it needs to do and it just kept that file sticking around? So let's go ahead and remove this file, save that, and rerun our integration test. And when it's done running, we shouldn't see these files sticking around anymore. It should kind of move them to the corresponding folders and then delete them. Now, I don't know, I think this took longer than what we'd expect in Jest. This is the problem with integration tests, is that they can take some extra time. So I'm going to just increase the timeout a little bit and see if that fixes our issue, because the file doesn't exist anymore. But for some reason, the test timed out. Oh, it's because our backend keeps crashing. Why is the backend crashing? No such file or directory. Okay, what we want to do is change this to before each. I think the issue is that we write the file, the first test is moving it, and then the next test is failing because that file doesn't exist. So I'm just going to say before each and after each. And I don't think I need to increase the timeout because the test was just bad. So this is kind of a mess. This little video is a mess, but hopefully you're learning something, you know. I'm debugging on the fly, and this is stuff that actually happens. So I think the test case just needs to be updated. This is why I'm moving too fast. I'm moving around. I need to slow down and verify that stuff I'm doing is actually correct. So expect good file exists. Does bad file exist, right? We need to check that it's in the bad directory, and that should be truthy. And we can run this. Again, we can add more expects. Like, we should expect that there is no file moved to the good directory in this case. I don't know if that's kind of crossing the bounds of what your test should do, but sometimes it's safe to like make sure that, hey, this isn't writing to two directories. But I don't know. There's 1,000 things that a piece of code can do. So it's like, how much do you need to test in your test? I would just test the happy path. Make sure that it's put into the correct directory that you expect. And if there's a huge risk of having it put into both directories for some reason, then verify that it doesn't get put into both directories. All right, so we have an integration test. You'll notice that we have a fully working Express application. It's using that exact same code that we created in the last video. You see how easy it was just to put it in this file, and everything works exactly as we intended it to. I think using test-driven development on the smaller subcomponents first can help you build out larger components. So that's what we did here. And yeah, I think that's about it. So if you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to give me a thumbs up and also leave me a comment below if you have suggestions of how I can better do test-driven development. I know at the end here I was kind of jumping around and probably not writing the best code that I could, but we fixed some of the issues along the way, and I hope you learned something from that. And then, like always, if you're new to this channel, be sure to give me a subscribe, because I'm going to have other videos like this in the future that should hopefully help you become a better web developer and improve your ability to write code using test-driven development.